Welcome everyone to our discussion of the Corpse Party series. I wanted to make this video to talk about the new chapter added to the Switch and PS4 versions of Blood Covered. They do a bit of connecting with Corpse Party 2 and what may be in the future of the series. So here's what we're going to do. I will briefly go over the previous games of the series with a simple synopsis on knowledge we may need for these new chapters. After that, we'll go through the new chapter looking for references and clues on what is going on. And if you want to skip the recap and jump straight into the breakdown of the new chapter, I would jump ahead about 6 minutes. So, series recap. Before we begin, we will be spoiling a lot of the series, including many kills. So if you're not in spoiler culture or haven't caught up on the series, I probably would wait before watching this video. We'll start with Corpse Party Blood Covered. This game sets up Heavenly Host, what would later be called the Nirvana. The cast of Blood Covered perform a ritual called Sachiko Ever After, allegedly being a friendship charm that has circled around the internet. They screw it up and are transported to Heavenly Host Elementary, a building that used to exist on their old school grounds. This place is what spirits call a nexus of dimensions. Numerous alternate realities of the same place parallel with one another. This otherworldly plane was at the time held together by the ghosts of 3 children that were murdered many years earlier. The first parts of the story have the 3 child ghosts tormenting and killing off the cast, i.e. Seiko's suicide and Mayo getting rammed into and exploding on the wall by the infirmary. We learn later that the dimension can be broken down by appeasing the ghost children that hold the place together. After appeasing them, the ghost Yuki reveals that the 4th ghost, Sachiko, is the one who murdered them. She is in control of the Nexus, bringing kids for her mother's spirit and killing all who enter the plane on their own, i.e. the Sachiko Ever After charm. The group ends up appeasing Sachiko and the place breaks apart, letting the group escape as it creates a quote-unquote new Sachiko. So the biggest thing to take away from Blood Covered is the existence of the Nexus of Dimensions and the fact that Sachiko's spirit somehow became its master, not to mention others finding a way into the realm via the Ever After ritual. That plays a big role in the new chapter we'll discuss later. Next up is Book of Shadows. Most of this game isn't that important. It opens up as a continuation of the Wrong End 6 bad ending from Chapter 5 of Blood Covered. You know, the ending where the cast finds themselves in a time loop, endlessly reliving the events of the first game. Because of this, the canon situation of Book of Shadows has always been up for debate. While some of the chapters do seem to be canonical, like the bits with Satoshi and Miss Yui, only the epilogue is necessary for the overall lore. That epilogue introduces magic to the series. Ayumi tries to use a magical tome known as the Book of Shadows to resurrect everyone who died in Blood Covered. The spell fails and Ayumi's sister sacrifices her life to save her. This horrific backfire also leads into Blood Drive, the 3rd game of the series. This is where things get a little convoluted and messy. It takes place right after the epilogue from Book of Shadows, with Ayumi and Naomi still desperate to resurrect everyone. They find a new way to enter the Heavenly Host Nexus, the Ever After Stones. When brought together, they allow free entry into said dimension going in and out. These are used after Ayumi is tipped off that the Book of Shadows is inside the school and using the resurrection spell there will let it succeed. Magic is further expanded upon here as well. The Nexus, now called the Nirvana, was created by Sachiko's mother from a spell in the Book of Shadows. There's also an ancient group of European witches that were involved in a famous witch hunt, the leader of which is embedded inside the Nexus as its core and will. We're also introduced to a cult known as Martuba's Tomb that has been around since shortly after the witch hunts. We don't really know that much about them. From a combination of Blood Drive and the Corpse Party Cemetery manga, they are a group that combines technology and magic to spread curses through mediums like the internet. They were once the owners of the magical tome, the Book of Shadows. 2 agents of this organization show up in Blood Drive, aiming to keep a rival group from making their own version of the tome and are seemingly desperate to reclaim the original. Late in Blood Drive's story, the Nirvana and the real world begin to merge, causing an apocalypse to happen. During this time, the cult's founder dies and the entire group falls apart. The last we really see of them is Magari, one of its agents sent to the Nirvana, having returned home swearing to rebuild the organization. So, what do we take from Blood Drive? The Nirvana was made via magic, Martuba's tomb is a cult trying to reclaim the Book of Shadows, and the Ever After Stones are a way to enter the Nirvana without the charm ritual. Last of all, we have Corpse Party 2 Dead Patient. This one's a little weird as the game isn't finished. You can play it on Steam, but only through Chapter 1. It takes place in the Amare Hospital. Not much to take from here outside of a young girl awakening in said hospital trying to escape. Once she does, she finds out she's part of an experiment with walking corpses. Her heart has been surgically removed, but somehow she hasn't died. And that's the cliffhanger of Chapter 1. We don't know anything about what happens later. Alright, now the recap is over, so let's dive into Extra Chapter 16 of Blood Covered on the Switch and PS4. We start in the year 2020. A self-quarantine is happening and the protagonist is named Miku. Miku is a small-time live streamer who is quickly confirmed to be a patient at Amare Hospital, the very same one from Dead Patient. This means the hospital still exists and functions years after the events of that game. The Heavenly Host incident, i.e. Corpse Party Blood Covered, also seems to be public knowledge. We see Miku cycling through a book that details a ban on the ritual on school grounds by the Board of Education. It also mentions news reports and a young boy referred to as the legendary survivor of that nexus. Using the ritual as a means of becoming a popular streamer, Miku wants to do it with her best friend and seems to be a part of a setup. The Sachiko Ever After blog updates itself at night while she's looking at it with the instructions on how to perform the ritual. We also see her mention 2 shining stones delivered to her home along with a note asking if she had visited the Nirvana. These stones are of course the Ever After stones. After convincing Ryoka, her friend, to do the ritual on a live stream, the stream suddenly cuts out. They hear footsteps nearby and both black out, only for Miku to later awaken inside the Heavenly Host plane. Now this is also where things get a little sticky. Miku's phone has its clock go backwards 12 years to 2008, and there are many hints in the chapter that allude to time travel. One example being the chalkboard of room 1A as soon as you start it. It reads, even in another era, even if you pay in blood, the stone's curse surpasses time. When are you from? As she explores the school, she is being followed by a male voice that seems to know who she is. He's constantly asking if she wants to die and how he wishes to make that happen. For a while, she rejects the idea of where she is, thinking she got set up and kidnapped to an abandoned school building despite warnings from papers on the walls and spirits that speak with her. She eventually ends up in the infirmary finding Ryoka. The stalker then reveals himself. He's a man in a lab coat that works at the Amare Hospital, pulling out Miku's medical registration as proof. He confirms that they are inside the Nirvana and people end up there because he repeatedly updates the Sachiko Ever After blog with instructions on how to perform the ritual. During this conversation and his threats to kill her, Satoshi bursts into the room and attacks the man, letting Miku and Ryoka get out. The man is soon attacked by a black ghost, likely the same that attacked Naomi in Chapter 1 of Blood Covered. Before dying, he reveals that he wants to resurrect Martuba's tomb and cross time with the Ever After stones, trying to reach, quote-unquote, their lost nirvana. He also mentions that he has lost the stones by the time he was killed. After the encounter, Satoshi mentions that it is still 2008 and wants to escape with his friends. This would seemingly put Extra Chapter 16 in the same time frame as Blood Covered. But during his conversation with Miku, an earthquake makes him disappear and leave Miku and Ryoka alone. The chapter starts to close out, teasing that this is the story of their escape and to prepare for the next Heavenly Host. One final scene has a black screen detailing a woman in a black hood finding Miku's registration card. She seems to know of Amare Hospital, another possible tie-in to Corpse Party 2. So what can we take from this? Some Martuba's Tomb remnant that works at Amare Hospital managed to get his hands on the Ever After stones. He's been posting the ritual instructions online to get people into the Nirvana so he can kill them. He updates the blog while Miku is reading it, allegedly delivers to her the Ever After Stones, and she does the ritual. The footsteps outside the hallway before they black out makes me theorize it was this man that took them into the Nirvana in the first place. He likely snuck in the room and scared them, took the stones, and transported all of them into the plane. Now, how they went back in time is a mystery. Knowing that Martuba was a group based around combining technology and magic, we may find info on the future on whether or not they may have modified the stones to have that sort of function. Now, there's also the question of when and where they are in reference to the first game of the series. Exploring this version of the school, we see that the girls' bathroom on the 3rd floor is not the same one Seiko died in. All stalls but one are filled with hanging corpses. But the wall outside the infirmary did have the blood splatter from what happened to Mayu. It looks partially cleaned up, so this could be after Shig dug through it and found the severed tongue in the floor underneath. There's also the fact that Satoshi was by himself when he showed up. My theory is that Satoshi temporarily showed up in the parallel dimension Miku and Ryoka arrived in between the ghost of Naho knocking him out and him waking up in the infirmary hallway before finding Naomi. Considering he disappears from the same hall he wakes up in during Chapter 4 of Bloodcovered, it could make sense that Miku and Ryoka are trapped in one of the many mirror dimensions of their Nirvana that the cast of Bloodcovered just didn't visit. There's also the hooded woman at the end. Since she picks up Miku's medical card, it's safe to assume that she is in the same version of the Nirvana as Miku and Ryoka. Though to be honest, I don't remember any person matching this description from the series. This could be an entirely new character, or it could bring back the rival organization that Martuba was fighting with in Blood Drive. Either way, one final thing to talk about is time travel. This makes the future of the series a bit unclear and weird. Granted, this isn't the first time time travel has been used in the series. If you haven't watched it, and most of you probably haven't, the second Corpse Party live action movie, the Book of Shadows movie, featured time travel. Ayumi and Naomi used one of Sachiko's bones to create a time portal to Heavenly Host in the hope of saving their lost friends. Though the time travel in that movie could only be used once. If we assume that this remnant from Martuba's tomb was using the Ever After Stones multiple times with updating that blog, that would hint that you could use the stones to not only traverse reality and the Nirvana, but the present and the past. But I think that's enough speculation for today. What do all of you think about this? What are your theories? This video was honestly a much bigger project than I thought it was going to be. I probably spent a good 6 to 8 hours writing the script alone. It was fun to make though, so I hope you enjoyed it. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.